A long time ago, in a faraway kingdom, a queen sat by a window as she sewed. It was winter, and the snowflakes fell like feathers onto the cold ground. Outside, children were making a snowman. When the queen saw them, she longed for a child of her own. Roll a giant snowball to build a snowman. Roll another snowball for the head, then drag it. Now decorate your snowman. Well done. That's a wonderful snowman. As she gazed out of her window, the queen saw a raven flying by. She said to herself, "How I wish I had a daughter with skin as white as snow, lips as red as berries, and hair as black as a raven." The queen's wish came true. Within a year, a baby girl was born. The little princess had skin as white as snow, lips as red as berries, and raven black hair, just as the queen had dreamed. "Let's call her Snow White," said the queen. Sadly, the queen's joy did not last long. She died soon after her baby was born. A year later, the king married again. His new queen was beautiful but vain. She owned a magic mirror that could answer any question. Every day the queen asked, "Mirror, mirror, on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" The mirror always replied, "You, my queen, are fairest of them all." Years went by. With each passing day, little Snow White grew more beautiful. One day, when the queen asked the mirror her favorite question, she got a very different answer. Rub the magic mirror to answer the queen. "Mirror, mirror on the wall, how beautiful is my nose." "Your nose is as delicate as a rose." "Mirror, mirror on the wall, how beautiful is my neck." "Your neck is as graceful as a swan's." "Mirror, mirror on the wall, how beautiful is my skin." "Why, it's as soft as a peach." "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" "You're beautiful, it's true, but Snow White is fairer than you." "Snow White? No!" The queen exploded with anger. She knew the mirror's words were true. Calling for her huntsman, she said,
Take Snow White into the forest. Tie her to a tree for the wolves to gobble up.
The huntsman led Snow White deep into the forest, but seeing how scared she was, he couldn't bear to hurt the little girl. The huntsman untied Snow White's hands.
Run, he said. Run into the forest and don't ever come back.
As Snow White ran off, the huntsman tore a scrap of material from her dress. When he returned to the palace, he showed this to the queen, saying,
I did as you asked. This is all that remains of Snow White.
Snow White ran deeper and deeper into the forest. Tired, hungry, and far from home, she began to cry. It would soon be night, and the wolves were getting closer. Move Snow White around the forest to find food and a safe place to sleep. Thank you for helping me. What a cute cottage. Snow White walked slowly up to the tiny cottage. When she knocked on the door, it swung open. There was nobody there. Inside, everything was tiny. Children must live here, she thought. A stew bubbled away over a fire. In the middle of the room was a table with 7 little chairs, all set for dinner. In front of every chair there was a spoon, a bowl of stew, and a plate with bread. Snow White was still hungry. She had a small mouthful of soup from each of the bowls, and a nibble of bread from each plate. Upstairs, she found a tiny bedroom. I don't know who lives here, Snow White thought, but they are very messy. And being a tidy sort of person, she set about putting everything in its place. Let's tidy the room. Put the clothes in the basket, the tools in the toolbox, and the boots on the bench. Thank you. Oh, I feel so sleepy. While Snow White slept, the owners of the cottage came home. They were hungry and tired after a long day working in the mines. As they marched into the house, the miners all shouted angrily,
Who's been tidying our house?
Looking at their bowls, they grumbled,
Who's been eating our soup?
The miners ate the rest of the soup, then clumped noisily upstairs.
Who's been sleeping in our bed?
They cried out. But as soon as the miners saw the beautiful little girl asleep on the bed, they felt sorry for her. When she awoke, Snow White was shocked to find 7 little men staring at her. They were dwarfs.
Don't be afraid,
they said.
If you cook, clean, and tidy for us, then you can stay with us.
And that's exactly what happened. Snow White kept the house clean and tidy and chopped wood for the fire. Each night, she cooked a tasty meal for the dwarfs. Hurry up! Your food is getting cold. Snow White loved living with the dwarfs. She looked after them, and they looked after her. When Snow White told them about the wicked queen, they said,
Stay with us as long as you want.
each morning, as the dwarfs headed off to the mines, they warned Snow White,
Take care. Don't let anyone in.
Then Snow White got to work. She enjoyed doing the sewing, cleaning, and cooking. In the palace, princesses weren't allowed to do anything. With Snow White gone, the queen was happy too. She sang to her mirror,
Who is the fairest of them all?
The mirror replied,
You, my queen, are fair. It is true. But Snow White, who lives with the 7 dwarfs, is still 1,000 times fairer than you. What? Still alive? The queen howled. Throw the huntsman into the dungeon. I'll find Snow White myself. If I wear a disguise, she won't know it's me.
Give the queen an ugly disguise. Choose a wig, pick a nose, then add a final touch.
Well done. That's really horrible.
Dressed in her disguise, the queen came knocking on the dwarf's door.
Who will buy my colorful belts and silk ribbons?
She sang. Snow White had promised not to let anyone in, but seeing the colorful ribbons, she opened the door. In a flash, the queen threw a belt around Snow White's waist. She pulled it as tight as she could. Poor Snow White fainted and fell to the floor. Thinking that Snow White was dead, the queen returned to the castle.
Now, I'm the fairest of them all.
She laughed. As the sun was setting, the dwarfs returned from the mines. They were shocked to find Snow White lying on the ground.
She's dead!
The dwarfs gasped. But when they loosened the belt, Snow White breathed and sat up again.
It must have been the wicked queen.
Agreed the dwarfs. The next day, they set off for the mines to dig for gems.
Snow White, they said, promise not to let anyone in.
I promise, she replied.
Great job. Let's get back to the cottage.
The queen flew into a fury when the mirror told her that Snow White was still alive. Dressed as an old lady, she hurried back to the cottage. This time, the queen carried a comb dipped in poison.
Brushes and combs for sale,
she called out. Snow White peeped out and said, I'm sorry, but I can't let you in.
Just give it a quick try,
pleaded the queen, pulling out the glittering comb. It looked so wonderful. Snow White opened the door. Snow White brushed the comb through her long hair. A moment later, she dropped to the ground like a stone. Luckily, the dwarfs returned home soon after sunset. When they saw Snow White lying on the ground, they knew the queen had returned. Quickly, they took out the poison comb. When Snow White awoke, the dwarfs warned her again.
Don't open the door to anyone, ever.
The wicked queen was already brewing an even stronger potion. This would make Snow White sleep forever. Spoil the queen's potion. Follow her recipe, then add an extra ingredient when she's not looking.
What else do I need?
Add something else, quick.
Who did that?
Finally, the queen finished her potion. Then she picked an apple that was green on one side and red on the other. Dipping just the red side in the potion, she set off for the dwarf's cottage. This time, Snow White refused to open the door. The queen cut the apple in half. Nibbling the green part herself, she handed Snow White the red half through the window. The apple looked so juicy. "Taste it," hissed the queen. With one bite, Snow White fell into such a deep sleep that even the dwarfs thought she was dead. The dwarfs built a glass casket for Snow White to lie in, so they could see her every day. Each morning, they put fresh flowers by her side. 12 years passed by. Then one day, a prince traveling through the land heard the story of Snow White and the glass casket. Vowing to find her, he rode deep into the forest. Tap the bushes to cut a path to Snow White. Move the prince through the gap, then tap him to cross the river.
She's so beautiful.
Though asleep all those years, Snow White had grown from a girl into a beautiful woman. The prince leaned over and kissed the sleeping princess. As he did, the piece of poisoned apple in her mouth fell out. Snow White opened her eyes and gazed up at the prince's handsome face. It was love at first sight. Not long after, they agreed to marry. The morning of the wedding, the queen asked the mirror once again,
Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?
The mirror replied,
You, my queen, are fair, it is true, but the prince's bride is 1,000 times fairer than you.
This time, the queen was so cross that she flung the mirror down to the ground. It smashed into 1,000,000 glass pieces. The queen jumped in her carriage, desperate to see the prince's bride for herself. To play a wedding tune for Snow White, tap on the panels when they glow. Now play your own tune.
Ooh la la!
In her wedding dress, Snow White looked more beautiful than ever. The wicked queen's eyes blazed with anger, but there was nothing she could do. 7 small but very strong pairs of hands gripped her tight. When he learned what the wicked queen had done, the king banished her from his kingdom forever. She was never seen again. The kind huntsman was freed from the dungeons. As for Snow White and the prince, they lived happily ever after.
Ooh la la! Ooh la la!